Live meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. As with our new tradition, please rise and join me as we start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thanks. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce this morning's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 4 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking on modernizing spectrum sharing for satellite broadband and revision of the Commission's rules to establish more efficient spectrum sharing between NGSO and GSO satellite systems. Second, you will consider a report and order, 6th report and order, and further notice of proposed rulemaking on the lower 37 gigahertz band and use of spectrum bands above 24 gigahertz for mobile radio services. Third, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that proposes to require that providers that continue to rely on non-IP networks implement non-IP caller ID authentication frameworks, including proposing to develop criteria for evaluating whether non-IP caller ID authentication solutions are developed and reasonably available, as required by the TRACE Act, and proposing to conclude that certain existing frameworks satisfy those requirements. Fourth, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking on review of foreign ownership policies for broadcast, common carrier, and aeronautical radio licenses under Section 310b4 of the Communications Act of 1934 as amended. Today's first item, titled Modernizing Spectrum Sharing for Satellite Broadband, Revision of the Commission's Rules to Establish More Efficient Spectrum Sharing Between NGSO and GSO Satellite Systems, will be presented by the Space Bureau. Jay Schwartz, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Chief Schwartz, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Excited to be here with several colleagues from the Space Bureau to present this item. With me at the table, I have Jennifer Gilsnan, Sankar Prasad, Janine Poltrineri, and Clay DeSalle, who will introduce the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. More Americans than ever rely on satellite broadband for high-speed connections and life-saving services. The marketplace is already delivering low-latency internet access across the United States via satellites in low Earth orbit. Yet the services offered by these innovative new broadband constellations are limited by old regulations. This notice of proposed rulemaking would examine modern satellite technology and operations to address the single most constraining regulatory requirement on broadband satellite systems today. It would take a fresh look at rules dating to the 1990s that affect satellite systems in the most commonly used spectrum bands for satellite broadband, between 10.7 and 20.2 gigahertz. The notice would invite public comment on the spectrum sharing regime between geostationary and non-geostationary satellites defined by power limits, known as equivalent power flux density limits, that apply to non-geostationary satellite systems for the protection of geostationary satellite networks. Specifically, the notice would ask how satellite operations have changed in the 20-plus years since these rules were adopted, how current limits affect geostationary satellites and impact the services provided by non-geostationary satellites, and whether updated or alternative sharing frameworks would promote greater efficiency to the benefit of American consumers. In order to seek comment on modern spectrum sharing rules for satellite broadband, the Bureau recommends adoption of this notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits.
Thank you very much, Clay, for the presentation. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deeply appreciate the hard work by the team here. There was broad consensus on this item, and any rules that we have in the satellite space that are over 20 years old are definitely worth a fresh look. So has my vote.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Stark's comments. The satellite world has changed greatly, even in the past 10 years, never mind the past 20. And a fresh look at all of the bands mentioned, together with EPFD limits, is very much in order. So thanks very much for putting this together.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gomez.
That's me. Thank you. Fostering innovation to benefit consumers is one of our core drivers here at the FCC. I'm glad to see that in this notice of proposed rulemaking, we are fostering innovation in satellite communications by beginning to explore updates to outdated EPFD limits. And I support the efforts of the U.S. to inspire similar efforts at the International Telecommunication Union. NGSO providers are quite capable, technically, of meeting updated EPFD limits within our geographical borders and established ITU limits beyond them, although it would be better for innovation and consumers to have standardized global EPFD limits. In the end, this is about providing broadband services to consumers, so I thank you, the Space Bureau, for your great work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Last week, I had the chance to visit Midland, Texas. It was a moment of firsts for me, and it started out that way pretty quickly. Not long after I touched down at the airport, my phone buzzed alert with an emergency alert from the National Weather Service about an imminent dust storm, which was the first time I got one of those alerts on my phone. Thankfully, one never headed our way, but it was a reminder that we were squarely in West Texas's Permian Basin. That dry, dusty part of our country has played a key role in America's past. Ever since oil was discovered there over 100 years ago, entrepreneurs and risk takers have flocked to that part of the country. And Midland has been supplying the energy that powers us forward ever since. But Midland is also looking to the future, and it's the reason that I visited last week with Chairman Ted Cruz. A high-tech company chose Midland as the place to manufacture and build a brand new constellation of low Earth orbit satellites. And they've been hard at work expanding both their footprint and their workforce. Chairman Cruz and I had the chance to spend time with the men and women that are building these Texas-sized satellites, and I can assure you that they are bringing the same determination and dedication to that job that has made Midland famous. Their efforts are part of a broader and important trend in the satellite industry. A new generation of LEO satellite systems are bringing fast and reliable high-speed internet to even more parts of the country and the globe. But even as the space and satellite industry booms from Long Beach to Midland to Cape Canaveral and so many places in between, we're still leaving a lot on the table. American innovators and the people they want to serve have been throttled by outdated rules. You see, these next-generation systems are still governed today by rules that were adopted over 30 years ago. The power limits developed in the 1990s potentially hamper satellite broadband by degrading signal quality, reducing coverage, limiting capacity, and making it harder to share spectrum with other satellite systems. Back then, high-speed satellite broadband was mostly considered the stuff of science fiction, and the ability to share between satellite systems was primitive. Fast forward to today, and breakthrough advances enable efficient spectrum use and sharing, making satellite broadband a real competitive option. I'm committed to making sure that our rules do not stifle investment and innovation, especially in the case of new satellite broadband services where the potential benefits are so great. And let's not forget, winning in space is both an economic and national security imperative. And that's why, as part of our broader Final Frontiers agenda, we're taking a fresh look at the decades-old spectrum sharing regime between geostationary and non-geostationary satellite systems. My hope and expectation is that this effort will clear a path for even faster and more robust broadband services from space. If we do, many more Americans who've been stuck on the wrong side of the digital divide will now be able to enjoy the benefits of high-speed internet from anywhere in the country. This is potentially a big deal. For their great work on today's item, I want to express my thanks in particular to Clay DeSalle, Jennifer Gilsonen, Joseph Hill, Catherine Medley, Janine Poltronero, Sankar Prasad, Jay Schwartz from the Space Bureau, as well as Neshe Gundelsberger from the Office of International Affairs. With that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Utilizing the Lower 37 Gigahertz Band, Use of Spectrum Bands Above 24 Gigahertz for Modal Radio Services, and will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Joel Taubenblatt, Acting Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. I'll buy a couple more seconds for Joel to settle in. Chief Taubenblatt, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. I'm pleased to introduce with me at the table John Schaubel, Deputy Chief of the Broadband Division of the Wireless Bureau, and Catherine Schrader, an Attorney Advisor in that division, and Catherine will present the item this morning.
Good morning, Chairman Carr, and good morning, Commissioners. The item before you today would make 600 megahertz of spectrum in the lower 37 gigahertz band available for fixed and mobile use by establishing a mechanism for commercial access. This spectrum, which is shared between non-federal and federal operators, is considered desirable for fixed wireless broadband, Internet of Things, and other innovative services. This item represents another milestone in the FCC's longstanding efforts in collaboration with NTIA and DoD to provide access to a block of millimeter wave spectrum with low barriers to entry, including availability of existing equipment used in adjacent bands. This item establishes a streamlined process for non-federal users to gain access to the band. A prospective user would apply for and obtain a nationwide non-exclusive license from the Commission. Next, the applicant would determine whether its proposed site contour overlaps with any existing site contour in the band. If the contours do not overlap, the applicant would register its site pursuant to procedures to be established by the FCC. If the contours do overlap, the applicant would coordinate with the other users to ensure that their respective sites can coexist, and if coordination is successful, the applicant could register its site. In addition to spelling out the licensing and coordination framework, this item brings the lower 37 gigahertz band closer to commercialization by adopting other service rules. To promote efficient use of the band and prevent spectrum warehousing, the item requires that sites be constructed and operational within a year of registration. It also establishes an initial site registration window for the band, with tighter timeframes for construction, designed to prevent speculative registrations. The item also establishes priority in the bottom 200 megahertz of the band for operations by the Department of Defense and the military. Non-federal operators would be able to deploy in that portion of the band, but they would have to modify or cease operations if they are notified that a military operator has started construction on facilities that would receive interference from their operations. The further notice asks whether we should change the level of emissions protection for services in the passive band below 37 gigahertz and what effects that change might have on deployment of services in the lower 37 gigahertz band. The further notice also asks whether we could improve the efficiency of the coordination process by developing an automated portal for coordination, by incorporating clutter models into the calculation of the interference contour, or by moving to a dynamic spectrum management system. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our spectrum pipeline isn't just about securing our economic future here domestically. It's also essential for America's continued competitiveness on the global stage. This order shows that the Commission is committed to addressing this pressing need. And despite our ongoing lapse in auction authority, I'm glad that we're leaving no stone unturned in providing new spectrum opportunities that will boost innovation and better serve our American consumers. I also want to thank the chair and his team for working with me to establish clearly articulated timelines in this order to ensure what I think is valuable spectrum here that not only gets to put to use quickly, but also supports as many users as possible. We need a coordination process that is well understood and predictable. And so clarifying the full scope of the coordination process as quickly as possible will help provide that certainty that potential users need to invest. I appreciate the efforts of the team and this crucial work. It has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. It's always great to hear about initiatives to increase our experience with communications in millimeter wave, obviously a group of bands that will become more and more significant for communications over time. So it's great to hear about this item, and it has my support.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see that we are here today making 600 megahertz of high band spectrum in the lower 37 gigahertz band available. The work to get to today has been long in the making. After the band was identified for further study in the 2023 National Spectrum Strategy, collaboration picked up, and NTIA published a study with recommendations in late 2024. The particular circumstances of this band make this initial coordination mechanism innovative while leaving room for future dynamic spectrum management opportunities. This strikes the right balance in the lower 37 gigahertz. I'm pleased to see that the National Spectrum Strategy process resulted in a good proposal for this band. Getting to today took thoughtful consideration and collaboration across government, as it should. So thank you to the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau for your impressive work on this order.
Thank you, Commissioner. As you saw with the first item on our agenda today and with the past two open meetings, the Commission has been focused on freeing up more spectrum for more intensive use. At our January meeting, we kickstarted the process for auctioning AWS-3 spectrum licenses, which have sat in inventory for years. We also started the process of opening up additional portions of the C-band. This month, we're bringing a spectrum focus as well, as you saw with our first item, where we advanced a spectrum sharing regime that could potentially enable faster satellite broadband services. Now, there's a good reason for prioritizing spectrum early on. Freeing up spectrum for commercial use drives down prices for consumers, brings families across the digital divide, and promotes America's national security. With our decision here, we look at another step forward on spectrum, this time in the 37 gigahertz band. And as Commissioner Gomez pointed out, it picks up on a lot of work that's been going on over the years in this particular band. Specifically, we're once again exploring creative ways the FCC could unleash wireless innovation in this underutilized swath of spectrum. The lower 37 gigahertz band can be used to support services like fixed wireless broadband, as well as the Internet of Things. But there are challenges. The lower 37 gigahertz band is a shared band. Both government and commercial entities are allowed to operate in it, and there are no clear rules of the road for sharing. This lack of clarity prevents companies from moving forward with investments and deployments. This proceeding can fix that by establishing rules for commercial fixed wireless on a shared basis with federal users. If we succeed, this new licensing framework could unlock 600 megahertz of spectrum for new and more intensive commercial services, laying the foundation for massive innovation and growth. Thank you in particular to Faraz Ahmad, Baron Chan, Barbara Esbin, Ethan Jeans, John Schabel, and Catherine Schrader in the Wireless Bureau for their work on the item. It certainly has my support. We will now proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye as well. This item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Caller ID Authentication on Non-IP Networks to Block Robocalls, and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Trent Hartgrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Trent, when you are ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Good morning. For your consideration, we have a notice of proposed rulemaking that if accepted by you all, would propose important protections for American households from illegally spoofed robocalls. I, of course, want to thank the Wireline Competition Bureau team that worked so hard and so quickly on this item. It's a really good item. But there was also a shared effort across the agency, including folks from the Enforcement Bureau, Consumer and Governmental Affairs, Office of Economics and Analytics, Office of General Counsel, and of course, Public Safety and Homeland Security. So it was a real team effort. Up here at the dais with me are far left, Kara Voth, the new deputy chief in the Bureau, Chris Laughlin, who's deputy chief in CPD, Eric Beath, who I'll get to in a second, and to my right is Jody May, head of CPD. Eric's going to do the presentation today, so take it away.
Thank you, Trent. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Robocalls continue to burden and harm the public, draining billions of dollars from the U.S. economy due to wasted time, nuisance, and fraud. The Commission has been on the forefront of efforts to protect the American public from illegal robocalls, including by requiring providers, as directed by Congress in the TRACE Act, to implement the STIR/SHAKEN caller ID authentication framework. While effective, STIR/SHAKEN only works in IP networks. The loss of STIR/SHAKEN information for calls that traverse non-IP networks significantly undermines the value of the framework as a whole, leading to improper spam labeling and blocking by downstream providers. In recent years, industry has developed and begun to utilize non-IP caller ID authentication frameworks. This notice of proposed rulemaking begins the Commission's process of evaluating whether those frameworks meet the criteria established by the TRACE Act, and whether providers must implement such frameworks in their non-IP networks. Specifically, the notice would propose to establish criteria for evaluating whether non-IP caller ID authentication frameworks are developed, reasonably available, and effective as required by the TRACE Act. It would propose to conclude that frameworks based on 2 existing non-IP caller ID authentication standards meet the TRACE Act's requirements, and seek comment on frameworks based on a 3rd standard. It would propose to require that providers implement non-IP caller ID authentication frameworks in their non-IP networks and certify in their robocall mitigation database filings that they have implemented such frameworks. Finally, it would propose to give providers a 2-year compliance timeline and seek comment on how that proposed timeline relates to providers' efforts to transition their networks to IP technology. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for the presentation. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great work by the team. Obviously, it's time, it's probably past time for us to go after these non-IP frameworks that need to be set in place here and to go to stomp out robocalls, which is something we're all for. So it has my support.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. This is exactly the kind of demanding and technical thing that we need to keep doing, unfortunately, in order to deal with the continued scourge of robocalls. Unfortunately, it's just very difficult to take a system that's based on trust and open access and to figure out how to clear it of bad actors, particularly when there are not just a multitude of technical considerations, but even considerations of international affairs. It's so I'm continually impressed by the efforts that WCB goes to make this happen, and it's just another opportunity for me to thank WCB for its great work on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Stopping unwanted and illegal robocalls must continue to be one of the FCC's top consumer protection priorities. I'm glad that for years and across different administrations, that has been the case. Because let's face it, these calls are not just a nuisance, they are often used to scam and defraud consumers, threatening their financial security and ending trust in our communications networks. Today, the FCC is taking an important step to close a significant loophole that bad actors have exploited to hide their identities. This new approach will help us move closer to a more uniform, accountable, and secure system, one where illegal calls are easier to trace and harder to make. So I want to thank the Wireline Competition Bureau staff for their work on this item, and I look forward to continuing to work on a bipartisan basis on consumer issues like this one.
Thank you for the statement. Over the years, the Commission's efforts to crack down on illegal robocalls have often been described as a game of whack-a-mole. We tackle one challenge, then another one pops up, and it goes on and on from there. But FCC leaders over the years, including Chairman Pai and Chairwoman Rosenworcel before me, have also worked on a more comprehensive solution, a call authentication framework known by its very James Bond-sounding acronym of STIR/SHAKEN. Even there, though, some gaps remain. While STIR/SHAKEN is one of our most effective tools for combating illegal robocalls, it only applies, as we've heard, to calls that travel exclusively over modern IP networks. If non-IP technology is used at any point in the call path, STIR/SHAKEN won't necessarily catch those robocalls, which is something that bad actors can and have taken advantage of. Congress anticipated this issue back in 2018 when it passed the TRACE Act. In that law, Congress established a June 2021 deadline for carriers to take reasonable measures to implement an authentication framework that could work for non-IP calls. Specifically, Congress directed the Commission to grant a delay of the non-IP compliance date if caller authentication solutions for those networks weren't readily available. Flash forward to today, and the FCC has been granting waivers for a number of years. But technology has also continued to evolve at the same time. So I think it's appropriate for the Commission to look at requiring even the non-IP components of networks to meet the standards laid out in the TRACE Act. As we do so, though, we should be mindful of the pace and nature of the broader transition to all IP networks. In fact, I think there's much more the FCC can and should be doing to accelerate that transition. So we're proceeding today with an open mind, whether it's through a faster IP transition or through the adoption and implementation of caller ID authentication solutions for non-IP networks. It's time for the FCC to examine this gap in our robocall defenses. For my part, I want to thank in particular Eric Beath, as we heard from, Jesse Goodwin, Trent Harkrader, Chris Laughlin, Jonathan Lecter, Jody May, Zach Ross, and Kara Voth for their great work on the item. It has my support, and with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is titled Clarifying Foreign Ownership Rules and will be presented by the Office of International Affairs. Thomas Sullivan, Acting Chief of the Office, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Chief Sullivan, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Before you is a notice of proposed rulemaking for the Commission's Section 310B Foreign Ownership Rules. The notice was a tremendous effort by the great staff in OIA and the Media Bureau. With me at the table from the Office of International Affairs are Brenda Villanueva, Deputy Chief of the Telecommunications and Analysis Division, and Farah Mohseni-Kalor, Attorney Advisor in the division and the lead attorney on this effort in OIA. With me from the Media Bureau are Erin Boone, Acting Bureau Chief, Benjamin Arden, Special Counsel, and Emily Harrison, Attorney Advisor in the Video Division and the lead attorney on this from the Media Bureau. Farah will present the item.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Office of International Affairs and the Media Bureau are pleased to present the first proposed rulemaking addressing foreign ownership issues related to Section 310B since 2016. Over the past decade, we have seen increasingly complex foreign ownership structures. However, when petitioners fail to provide complete ownership information, this leads to processing delays. The notice proposes to codify current practices to make it easier for entities to understand and navigate our foreign ownership rules, avoid inconsistent outcomes, reduce costs, and facilitate the Commission's public interest analysis. The notice proposes to clarify definitions and concepts in our foreign ownership rules, such as the definition of a controlling U.S. parent, which is important in calculating an entity's foreign interests. Other clarifications include the rules regarding trusts and trustees, U.S. residency requirements, and the treatment of deemed voting interests for limited liability companies and limited partnerships. The notice also proposes to clarify requirements for petitioners seeking to correct situations where they are inadvertently out of compliance with the foreign ownership rules, and to extend remedial procedures and methodologies to privately held companies. Additionally, the notice proposes to clarify the information needed in remedial petitions. The notice also seeks comment on requiring amendments to a pending petition to be filed as a complete restated petition. With regard to broadcast licensees only, the notice seeks comment on processing of pending broadcast applications during the pendency of a remedial Section 310B petition and other considerations related to processing non-commercial education and low-power FM station applications. Finally, the notice seeks comment on other potential opportunities to reduce unnecessary regulatory burdens in the context of our foreign ownership review. We recommend adoption of the notice and request editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has my support. This is obviously a confluence of issues here, our national security issues that we have and foreign ownership, as well as parties have a vested interest in having clear expectations in the parties that are before us. So I think this is a good place to start. Has my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. This item has my support, but no special comments at this time.
Thanks. Commissioner Gomez.
So the FCC's foreign ownership rules, which serve our national security interests, are important and complex, and this item proposes to codify definitions and concepts developed over years of practice that will facilitate streamlined processing for the benefits of both the regulated and the Commission staff. So I want to thank the Office of International Affairs and the Media Bureau for the careful and detailed analysis that went into this notice of proposed rulemaking. It is an excellent example of a thoughtful and targeted effort to reduce burdens while protecting important public interests.
Thank you, Commissioner. If you take the FCC's Code of Federal Regulations and you stack it up end to end, it can seem like a pretty daunting tower of regulations. You should try it. I've done it before. But wait, there's more. The FCC also has a significant set of regulatory requirements that are off the books entirely. But having unwritten, or at least uncodified, rules is not very efficient. This only makes it harder for entities to understand and navigate our requirements, and it risks inconsistent outcomes, needlessly raises costs, and can waste staff resources. One case in point is the FCC's set of foreign ownership requirements. Over the past decades, we've approved many transactions involving foreign investment in the country. That's a good thing. Along the way, we considered new questions about the meaning of our rules, but in many cases, we never codified those decisions or regulations. So today, we seek comment on writing those down in the CFR. Call it an exercise in good government. But good government also means simplifying outdated rules when possible, and we'll take the opportunity here to do that as well. To that end, we propose streamlining our review process, and we're seeking comment on identifying and eliminating any unnecessary or burdensome rules that we find along the way. For my part, I want to express my thanks and appreciation to the staff that worked hard on this, including Desiree Hansen, Farah Mosankalor, Joseph Meyer, and Brenda Villanueva, in the Office of International Affairs, as well as Benjamin Arden, or as we know him, Ben Arden, in the Media Bureau, Emily Harrison, and my advisor/bureau chief, Aaron Boone. As well, thanks to the team effort on this one. We'll now proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. As we come to the end of this meeting, would my colleagues like to make any announcements at this time? I'll start with Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an announcement. That is that my advisor, Hannah Leapow, my media advisor, has transitioned from my office. I hope she's watching somewhere. Hannah, she truly was a spectacular media lawyer and a consummate, trusted advisor to me. I cannot say enough how much I valued her laugh as well as her real advice. And so I'm wishing her all the best on what she has next. She will make that announcement herself, but her FCC time has been deeply valued by me. I know by many in the room that have worked with her as well have seen her deep expertise. So thank you.
That's it? No other announcements?
That is the announcement.
Okay, I thought I'd check. Just thought I'd check. I gotta ask. Commissioner Symington.
I do have a couple of staff announcements. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I'd like to announce Gavin Wax of New York City as my chief of staff. Gavin is a graduate of Baruch College, the City University of New York, a 2025 Publius Fellow of the Claremont Institute, and the co-author of The Emerging Populist Majority. He has over a decade of experience in media and advertising with a focus on strategic communications, branding, and public engagement. And if you saw what happened to my Twitter impressions last week, then you would know what I'm talking about. In addition to his professional work, he's an established political commentator and columnist. I'd also like to announce Tom Struble of Salina, Kansas, joining me as senior legal advisor on detail from the Office of Engineering and Technology. Tom spent the past 5 years in OET as a legal advisor in the Office of the Chief Engineer. So he's got a wealth of experience in spectrum policy and equipment authorization issues, very timely right now, and I'm grateful to have him on board. Tom received his JD from GW Law and his bachelor's degree from the University of Kansas. So the Kansas Mafia continues. And finally, you all know how much I love good side parts, so I appreciate that Tom and Gavin both have similar taste in men's hairstyles. Thanks.
Thank you. It is now time to say thank you and goodbye to my spring 2025 externs. None of them is with us in person because, well, finals, but I hope they are able to watch. Sharon Lee will be graduating from George Mason University Antonin Scalia Law School next month. I wish Sharon luck as she prepares for the bar exam this summer, and in the fall, Sharon will join Wiley Ryan as an associate, and they are lucky to have her. Sharon has done exemplary work for me these past few months. I know that her analytical skills, attention to detail, and great attitude will serve her well in her career, and I will miss having her in my office. Sofia Carrillo is a rising third-year law student at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Sophia contributed to my office in many ways, not to the least of which was making a suggestion for the Next Generation 911 Notice of Proposed Rulemaking last month, which was ultimately implemented and will make a real difference for communities experiencing 911 outages. This summer, Sophia will serve as a law clerk at the Lower Colorado River Authority in Austin, Texas, or LCRA. The LCRA manages the Lower Colorado River, generates and transmits electricity, and provides essential infrastructure services, including expanding telecommunications access across central Texas. So building on her experience in telecommunications access and policy, Sophia will support LCRA's legal team on a variety of regulatory and infrastructure matters. And last but not least, Mallory Burstein. Mallory is graduating next month from Cornell University with a bachelor's degree in industrial and labor relations and minors in law and society and history, because she's very much a go-getter. Mallory was our first undergraduate intern and contributed in many ways to our office, providing us with focused and thoughtful research and analysis that we will continue to use long after she is gone. All three of my interns added great value to my office in large and small ways that helped me and also demonstrated their great potential. So I look forward to watching their careers unfold. And I will have one more announcement, but it follows on one the chairman is making, and I don't want to get ahead of him.
Thanks, my colleagues. So to start with, I want to recognize Trent Harkrader. You know, when I started in this job in January as chair, I knew that there'd be a lot of transition, there'd be a lot of changes, and we really needed some consistent, even-keeled leadership. And that's why very early on, I went to Trent and I asked Trent if he'd be willing to stay on and continue to lead the Wireline Bureau for a bit of time, and he was exceptionally gracious in agreeing to do that. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work closely with Trent on a range of important FCC matters. Trent's a problem solver. If it's difficult, you give it to Trent. If it has the potential to break along partisan lines and you don't want it to or can't afford it to, you give it to Trent. He has consistently taken on some of the most complex issues before the FCC. He's resolved them by drawing on the unique expertise that he has developed from his years of service throughout the agency. Trent has always been a trusted partner to me and a devoted public servant. I want to thank him again for agreeing at my request that he run the Wireline Bureau during the transition. As Trent now steps back from that role, I am very eager to see everything that he is going to continue to accomplish. I consider Trent a friend and have really appreciated all the great work that we've gotten done together over the years. And again, thank you for stepping up in this transition time. And I'll turn over back to Commissioner Gomez for some more. Back to you.
Thank you. I also want to thank Trent for his service to the, I also want to thank you, Trent, for your service to the Commission and the public. I've known Trent for many years and have relied on his good guidance since my confirmation as a commissioner. He exemplifies the best of how the Commission can operate. He is knowledgeable, thoughtful, and strategic, an honest broker that is trusted by all, Democrats and Republicans, public interest advocates, industry, and law firms. Trent is also a trusted leader to his staff. He has an eye for talent, understands the importance of mentorship, and puts in the hard work to build the kind of community that engenders loyalty. And he has a great sense of humor and never complained, at least to me, when I poached almost all my staff from his talented bureau. Trent, I will miss your wise counsel, and I look forward to working with you in your next capacity. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's the NBA playoffs, so I'm going to snatch that pass there, the pass back. Trent, you know, you have been a public servant of the highest order. You should be extraordinarily proud of your work for the FCC on behalf of the American people. As you've heard ubiquitously here, your hard work and dedication. We've had many calls on some of the hardest, most thorny, vexing questions on policy, on effectuating how it's going to get implemented, and I as well echo that just a sterling, exemplary job, and you have been deeply appreciated by me, by my team, and I just want you to know how much you have served the American people. And deeply appreciate it. We'll look forward to obviously continued great things from you as well.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't say something. Trent and I have spoken about this at more length, but in brief, I particularly appreciate his leadership as not only great for today, but also as exemplifying the finest traditions of the FCC and the old CCB. So thank you very much, Trent, and we'll miss you.
Thanks. Thank you, Trent. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Retirements. Yeah. Thank you again to Trent. Retirements this month, Jeff Goldthorpe, an electrical engineer and data scientist who last served as the Associate Bureau Chief in the FCC's Public Safety Bureau, retired earlier this month after over 22 years of service at the FCC. His portfolio included data analytics and national security policy matters. Prior to that position, Jeff held various technical advisory roles, including as chief of the FCC's Network Technology Division, which advised Commission staff on the public policy ramifications of emerging network technologies, and as general manager of a professional services business at Telcordia. Another one close to me, Lori Alexu, is retiring from the FCC after 21 years of service. Lori is one of the many unsung heroes at the Commission. She began her FCC career as a confidential assistant to Chairman Kevin Martin, not an easy job from what I can understand, and provided critical support to both Chairman Pai, also not an easy job, and Commissioner Meredith Baker. I got to know her in particular when I was a legal advisor for then Commissioner Pai when she worked in the office. For the last 6 years, though, Lori served as a litigation support specialist for OGC's appellate, FOIA, and privacy teams. Throughout, she has been the epitome of a team player, and we are incredibly grateful for her service here at the FCC and to the American people. Larry Atlas. Larry has been an OGC stalwart. Recently retired from the FCC after 18 years of service. First as Associate Bureau Chief in the Wireless and Common Carrier Bureaus, and then as a senior attorney in OGC's Administrative Law Division. Larry's legal acumen and reputation as a consummate problem solver were widely recognized. Over the years, Larry tackled some of the thorniest appropriations and fiscal law issues facing the FCC, and he did so with mastery, discretion, and creativity. Larry will certainly be missed, and we wish him the very best in his retirement, I'm told in sunny Sarasota, Florida. It's not intended as a laugh line, but we'll take it. John Lambert, an engineer in the Wireless Bureau's Broadband Division. He has worked at the agency for the past 17 years in our Gettysburg field office. He's focused on licensing issues, leading teams of analysts in the review of thousands of construction notifications. In addition, John has been involved in the U.S.-Canada cross-border coordination and provided engineering support for numerous technical rulemakings. Thank you to everybody that has retired and for your service at the agency. Finally, some condolences. It's with real sadness that I share with you that we lost a valued staffer this month, Monica DeLong. Monica had been an attorney with the FCC, specifically the Wireless Bureau, for over 17 years. She had been a huge contributor to the agency's work, primarily focusing on wireless transactions. I give my deepest sympathies to her family, to her friends, and to all the FCC colleagues that worked closely with her throughout the years. She will be deeply missed. And with that, Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next date for the Commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, May 22nd, 2025.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
Hello, everybody. We'll be starting our open meeting press conference momentarily, so if you could please take your conversations outside, we'll be getting started in a few minutes. Thank you. All right, everybody, thank you and for joining us for the Chairman's Open Meeting Press Conference. If I could just ask you to please give your outlet and your name when you ask your question, and we'll keep it to one question per reporter. And with that, I hand it over to the Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks much. All right, good morning. Welcome to a very rare Monday edition of the press conference. I guess that's because the monthly meeting was a Monday, so we don't do that very often. Exciting week here at the FCC and across government. This week marks the first 100 days of this Trump administration. We've been moving very, very quickly at the FCC. We will have a lot of information out this week, summarizing some of the work that we've gotten done over the first 100 days, probably more information than what you guys will even want to see. But we've been working on everything from restoring America's leadership in wireless to helping to unleash high-speed infrastructure builds. We've been working very hard to expand America's space economy, including through actions potentially that we are teeing up today. We've been looking to eliminate needless regulations, including launching the probably largest deregulatory initiative at the FCC in our delete, delete, delete proceeding. We're also focused on delivering efficient results at the agency. We've been working hard to do a top-to-bottom review of all of the contracts that we have. We have already reduced hundreds of millions of dollars of sort of long-term spend that we would have had under contracts that we don't think we need anymore. We've been returning folks to the building. It's been great to see. I've continued my walkabouts around the agency, and it's been very helpful to bump into more and more people inside the building. I think that's great. We've been working to protect consumers, cracking down on robocalls, taking a lot of actions on that front, and we've been strengthening our national security and public safety as well. We have a Council on National Security that we've stood up, and they've already launched some work streams that I think are going to bear fruit. With that, happy to open it up and take some of your questions. We can start down here.
Hi, Chairman Carr. Chris Cole with Law 360. I just wanted to ask about the 5G fund because you had indicated when the rules were passed, I guess it was last year, that the auction needed to wait until BEAD is fully rolled out, but now there may be some delays in that, so I'm wondering if that changes your view.
Yeah, my concern back then was that we had a little bit of the cart before the horse. You know, we had an issue then where we had lots and lots of different initiatives, lots of funding streams, including BEAD being sort of the largest of all of those, the $42 billion program. And originally the idea was you would see where BEAD goes, and then potentially there'd be other funding streams that could fill in the gaps. The timing wasn't clear back then about how all these programs were going to be aligned, and that's what I expressed my concerns about. No announcement today to make on that particular effort, though. But again, the key there is you want to make sure that things are moving efficiently, that they're complementing each other, and that we have sort of technology-neutral ways forward across the board.
Yeah, can you go into any more detail about the contracts that you've eliminated? Oh, contracts for what?
So we've done a look
Excuse me, Monty Taylor, Con Daly, sorry.
I know you are. We have set up our own sort of internal DOGE effort, and we have pulled every single contract that the FCC has, and we're doing a look as to whether we need it or not. We'll provide probably more this week as part of our first 100 days on some of the details of that, but I think in one instance we had a contract. Where's Delacorte? Is he here? Here. A hog trapping contract worth $50,000 or $60,000 a year. $50,000 a year. So that's one example. So hog trapping contract has been ended. Unrelated, if you enjoy hog trapping and want to do it for free, we will show you some of the FCC's properties that apparently had hog problems back in the day. So we're doing a look at sort of all sorts of different contracts. Obviously IT in particular is a big one. Long term, we want to try to move into a different environment from an IT perspective. For years, we've had these, individual, siloed, bespoke systems that are getting pretty old and clunky, and I think we can ultimately drive a lot of long-term efficiencies there as well. So it's really, looking at all the contracts that exist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Chairman Carr, John Hendel with Politico. Just wanted to ask about kind of what's next in the 60 Minutes proceeding. There's been a lot of comments coming in. We've seen President Trump himself weigh in a couple weeks ago, calling for kind of maximum fines and punishment related to 60 Minutes. At this point, when you're looking at this, what do you see as the menu of potential regulatory consequences, and what would be needed for resolution at this point? And we've had comments, we've had the unedited material. Kind of where is that now?
Well, look, all options remain on the table. That continues to be an open investigation. We thought that transparency was important. letting the American people participate in that proceeding, and that's exactly what we've done. As you've noted, we've taken in comments from the public. Personally, I have not, reviewed those comments at this point, but at some point we will get to it in terms of reviewing the comments and making a final decision. I mean, again, if you step back more broadly in terms of the approach that I'm driving at on media, I think the best way to think about the media ecosystem within the confines of this discussion, at least, is two pieces. On the one hand, you've got the national media programmers, principally ABC, CBS, and NBC. And when you look at all of the studies about trust in media right now, trust in media is at an all-time low. But it's not uniform. There's that second level, which is the actual local broadcasters that are licensed by the FCC, and trust there is actually significantly higher. And that's because you have local news, you have reporters. These are people that see these personalities in their community. One of the big things I'm trying to do with my media policy is to empower those local broadcasters to serve the needs of their local communities. Localism is one of the key guide stars of our media policy. So as I've been thinking about this, I think it's important to separate in people's mind the difference between national programmers and the local broadcasters. Let's empower those local broadcasters, but also they're the ones that ultimately have the public interest obligation. And there's potentially lots of things that we can do to make sure that they feel like they have the freedom to serve the needs of their local communities. Affiliation agreements are really interesting. A lot of them have been coming due. I wrote a letter actually at the end of last year to ABC on that to look at ways in which affiliation agreements potentially are being used to, one, exercise potentially too much control over local broadcasters, which could ultimately become an attribution issue that we would need to look at. But also we want to make sure that these arrangements between national programmers, ABC, NBC, CBS, and the local broadcasters enable a healthy TV broadcast media ecosystem. We don't want local broadcasters to ultimately go the way of newspapers. And when you look at the current dynamic, I'm not sure it's entirely healthy. So I want strong local broadcasters that feel empowered to serve their local communities. And I think if you look at a lot of what we're doing on media, it can be explained by trying to drive towards that goal. So.
Hi, Ted Johnson from Deadline. Actually, two related questions. One, what is the timeline, the status of your review of the Skydance Paramount merger? And the related question is, if the president settles his lawsuit with CBS and then orders you to approve that merger because of that settlement, how will you react to that? What will you do?
Well, the settlement and any discussions around that have nothing to do with the work that we're doing at the FCC. I mean, there's at least three different things that are going on. There's the litigation, of which we're not a part of, and there's been no discussions about. There is the transaction that's before us. There is the CBS News distortion, and we're taking those last two, running our normal course. On the CBS transaction itself, we are getting close to the informal 180-day clock. I think we're somewhere in the 160s, but we're just running our normal process across a lot of different transactions right now, and we're just going to apply the law and the facts and the record and move forward.
But if the president says approve this, would that have an impact on your decision? How would you react to that?
Well, look, like I said, we are simply focused on the record that's before us, and we're going to make our decision based on the agency's record itself, and can't sort of engage in the type of speculation that you have laid out there. So,
thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, Jericho Casper with Broadband Breakfast. Mr. Chairman, approaching your first 100 days this Wednesday, I'm curious if you set out to achieve everything that you have you achieved everything that you set out to? And now
everything and more. Everything and more.
Yeah. Now that the deregulatory proceeding is playing out, what's your next priority?
There's a lot that we've done, particularly on the media front, that gets a tremendous amount of coverage. I understand that. Also, the media likes to cover issues involving the media, but there's some stories that I think are haven't gotten the same headlines that we've done that we're going to continue to expand on. For instance, making sure that providers can invest in new high-speed networks is going to be one of the more significant work streams that we do. Copper retirement is a piece of that. We've already taken some actions on that front. I'd like to continue to look for ways that we can create the certainty so we don't have to people invest limited capital in two different networks, an old copper one, where hopefully we want them investing in new ones. So I think that's going to be a big one. Spectrum, we've been doing a lot of work there. Obviously, there continues to be lots of talks across government. as Congress works towards reconciliation, I'm hopeful that that's a place that we will get our auction authority restored, and then we will be sort of further off to the races on that. So there's a lot of work streams that we're doing. The deregulation initiative, we've been doing a lot of spade work at the FCC. We've had all the bureaus and offices basically complete an initial sweep of all of their regulations with an eye towards, which ones we need to keep, which ones we need to modify, which ones do we have the freedom to just go ahead and delete. So I think that's going to bear a lot of fruit as well. So, some of the same themes that you've seen in the first 100 days, but I think we're just going to be able to expand action as well, because ultimately we want to put forward a build agenda, an agenda that allows people to invest, whether it's in physical infrastructure here, whether it's in the space economy. I think those are areas that we're going to be pushing really hard on.
Thank you.
Thanks. Dave Sherbetson from Reuters. I just want to go back to media for a second, ask you a couple related questions. One, have you decided whether to tee up the Disney or Comcast complaints for public comment, like you did with the CBS 60 Minutes complaint? And President Trump 2 weeks ago wrote, it was referenced that he hopes that you will impose the maximum fines and punishment which is substantial for their unlawful and illegal behavior as a result of a 60 Minutes broadcast. Have you talked to him about that? Have you taken any steps toward doing that? Do you think it's appropriate for the president to publicly encourage you to go after the network for those remarks?
Well, no decisions have been made in terms of seeking public comment on those two that you raised. Again, I think if you step back, broadcasters have a very unique position in the market when it comes to other entities. They are licensed by the FCC, and when you license someone to operate, you're necessarily prohibiting others from using those airwaves. Because of that, they have a public interest obligation. And I think over the years, the FCC has largely stepped back from enforcing the public interest standard. I'm not sure I don't think that's correct. I think given the unique benefits that come from a federal broadcast license, it's important for the FCC to actually hold these entities accountable to the public interest. And there's a lot of rules and regulations that flow from that. News distortion is a piece of it. And I believe that the FCC should be vigorously enforcing the public interest. And if there's people that want to speak, to communicate, but they don't want the burdens that come from a federal spectrum license, then they have the opportunity to do that. There's lots of options. There's podcasts, there's cable shows. Those don't have the same type of federal public interest obligations that broadcasters do. But I think it's important that they do so. But again, that's the agenda that we're driving at. And the North Star there is we want these local broadcasters to feel empowered to actually serve the interests of their local communities and not simply become a pass-through for nationwide content coming principally from Hollywood and New York. We want localism. And I think that's important that we empower our local broadcasters to do that.
Drew Fitzgerald, Wall Street Journal. Another media question, just to follow up on John's. With regard to the 60 Minutes proceeding, the response to the 60 Minutes complaint, but also the Enforcement Bureau is looking into Comcast, into Disney. You said all options are on the table. What options do you have available to you, especially given some of the limited enforcement powers that the FCC has in the wake of Supreme Court rulings over the past year?
Yeah. The FCC continues to have all the same tools at its disposal today that it did before. You may be indicating there was a recent Fifth Circuit decision in an AT&T case that the court held, at least in that case, that they believed that the FCC's fining authority, at least as applied there, didn't comply with the Seventh Amendment. Obviously, we respect the decisions of the appellate courts, but that continues to not be the case in terms of our own view. We have other very similar cases that are pending in other circuits. We've already submitted filings in those other circuits with 28J letters expressing our view that we disagree with the Fifth Circuit. So our position continues to be that the FCC can impose fines, impose license revocations, our full suite of potential remedies as to broadcasters and others, notwithstanding the Fifth Circuit decision and JARC-C, in part because the FCC has a mechanism in our statute where people can get a trial after the FCC's administrative proceedings have continued. So again, respect the Fifth Circuit's decision, but we disagree ultimately with the conclusion there, particularly as it applies to other circuits.
And a quick follow-up on that. Do you believe that license revocation can be used as can be used in response to violations of the public interest standard, even as it applies to the content of a broadcaster's news operations?
Well, look, I don't want to get sort of too far down the speculation path, but ultimately, license revocations is a tool that the FCC has in its toolkit. It's long been viewed as sort of the regulatory death penalty. So it's a pretty high bar to meet to go down that path, but it is, one of the options the FCC has, and we're, continuing to take a vigorous look at the public interest standard and making sure that the FCC enforces it. We've opened lots of investigations so far. We're going to see where they go. We've looked at Disney and ABC in particular for some of their DEI practices. There's some concerning things that we've seen there about potential discrimination that we are continuing to run down inside the building. And we'll see where that investigation on Disney and ABC goes. But again, there's some concerning elements there about potentially making race-based and gender-based discriminatory decisions. We still have to let that play out in terms of the process, but that's one where I'm particularly interested to see where it goes. So good. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to hand it over to my colleague, Will Wyquist, for the Bureau press conference. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Good morning. So we will do the Bureau press conference. We'll take questions on the items that were adopted today. I'll go through them. If you have questions on that item, I'll call up the bureaus involved in that item. So the first item was the Space Bureau's spectrum sharing item. Do you have any questions, Monty? Space Bureau? Where is the Space Bureau? Oh, there. Monty?
I'm going to be playing the usual Com Daily role here and asking if there's been any changes since the draft version to the final here.
Sure. Thanks for your question. First of all, the chairman asked the Space Bureau to think about ways we could increase connectivity, particularly for things like rural broadband. And so this item we think is a really important step moving in that direction. Along those lines, we did have fairly limited ex partes that came into the proceeding, and so there were a few changes, many of them prompted by what you see in the ex partes, and I think those you'll be able to look at the final release, but I think those were along the lines of maybe leaning in just a little bit more in pursuit of being a little bit clearer about what the commission wanted to contemplate, all in service of ultimately better rural broadband.
Any other questions on this item? Great, thank you. All right, next up is the Wireless Bureau's lower 37 gigahertz. Wireless Bureau, Joel? We do have a question.
Monty Taylor, Com Daily. I was hoping you could tell me if there had been a lot of changes or any changes since the draft version.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, there were several ex partes that were filed in the record, and so there were some adjustments made in response to some of the positions taken through that process. I'd say sort of including asking a few additional questions in the further notice, trying to take into account those perspectives.
Any other questions on this item? Great. Okay, thank you. All right, next up, Wireline Bureau. Monty has a question. Shock. Brent, see you.
Hi, Monty Taylor, Com Daily. I was wondering if there have been any changes from the draft version to the final order.
Yes, so we received a number of ex partes. There was one change where we clarified that let me make sure I get this right, that the authentication obligations apply to all intermediate carriers. That was in response to an ex parte who just wanted to make sure that, like, when we were seeking comment, that our obligations were going to apply to all these intermediate carriers.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions on the robocall item? Great. Thanks. And last but not least, the foreign ownership item from the international. Monty? Okay, good. Tom would be very disappointed if not. And,
Everybody's got to have their day in court.
yeah.
He's going to surprise us all and ask
Be ready.
another question.
Yeah, were there any changes from the draft version to the final version on this one?
Thank you, Monty, for that question. There were only non-substantive editorial changes between the pre-publication draft and this.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions on this item? Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. With that, that's the end of the Bureau press conference. I'm going to hand it off to Commissioner Gomez. And thank you all very much. Have a good rest of your day.
Hello. Good afternoon. Gotta make it more my size. So it's good to see everyone here again today. As I've said before, I hope to meet with you every month after our meetings to answer your questions and to give you and everybody watching online a sense of where things stand here at the FCC and its growing campaign of censorship and control. Sadly, I predict that you will hear me say those words a lot in the next few months: censorship and control. In fact, battling the administration's campaign of censorship and control is the theme of the First Amendment tour I recently announced. We had a successful kickoff event last Thursday at the Center for Democracy and Technology, and I want to thank all of you who joined us or watched online. I felt the need to start taking our message in defense of our fundamental First Amendment rights and freedoms outside of Washington because I've been alarmed by the recent actions of this administration. And as those who know me can tell you, I'm not usually an alarmist. But here is what concerns me. Since the founding of our country, the First Amendment has protected our fundamental right to speak freely and to hold power to account. Today, the greatest threat to our freedom is coming from our own government. And let me say that again. The greatest threat to our right to speak freely is coming from our own government. As you all know, the FCC has targeted the editorial decisions of news networks, independent reporting by public media, and internal labor practices by private companies. These are dangerous and unprecedented actions taken by the leading government media regulator. You don't have to take my word for it. Groups from every part of the ideological spectrum agree with this assessment. And just last week, a longtime executive producer of 60 Minutes resigned because of his belief that the show's journalistic independence had been compromised. That's a first in the program's 57-year history. These actions threaten a free and independent press, undermine the First Amendment's free speech protections, and exert undue pressure that compromises the autonomy of private enterprises. More broadly, actions across the federal government have demonstrated a disturbing pattern of silencing dissenting voices. Here are just some of the most egregious examples. The government is investigating broadcasters for editorial decisions in their newsrooms. It is harassing private companies for their fair hiring practices. It is threatening tech companies that respond to consumer demand for fact-checking tools. It is trying to control university curricula. It is banning unions, targeting law firms, and even targeting cultural content at the Smithsonian. And it is firing Senate-confirmed Democrats of independent agencies who dare to speak the truth. The administration seems intent on targeting anyone who dares to speak up and disagree with its extreme agenda. To me, that's a campaign of censorship and control. But here's the thing. Silencing dissenting voices is not a show of strength. It is a sign of weakness. It shows that this administration knows that it cannot defend its actions on the merits. So it must resort to fear. We cannot allow fear to keep us from speaking up. I will continue to do so, and I hope and I pray that I'm not alone in that. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions. Monty.
Yeah, do you have any concerns about the cuts to contracts and such that the chairman brought up, or is FCC's ability to do its job being affected at all?
Thanks, Monty. I don't know what contracts are being cut. For me, if it undermines our ability to deliver to consumers, to protect innovation and competition, that would be very worrisome. I would be very worried if there were contracts that did our translation services, for example, or that provide closed captioning and hearing interpreters. I would be worried if those were the contracts, but I actually don't know what contracts are being cut.
Hi, Commissioner.
Hi.
Chris Cole with Law 360. I just wanted to ask, at the event last week at the launch of this initiative, you indicated, kind of to paraphrase, that some time and resources were now diverted from other activities that would normally be taking place. Are there any like prosaic things that the FCC does on a daily basis that it has less time and resources to do specifically?
What I have been saying is I've been bemoaning the fact that we are spending time and resources investigating broadcasters for their decisions, for their content decisions, instead of focusing on our core mission. We are not, as far as I can tell, focusing on connecting every American throughout the country and every person in the United States to affordable connectivity. We are not pursuing additional ways to improve our innovation. We're not giving public safety what they need. We're not preserving localism, competition, and diversity in media ownership if what we are doing is focusing our time on these sham investigations for the news providers' editorial decisions, as well as going after the fair hiring practices of private companies.
Commissioner Ted Johnson from Deadline. Given what happened at the FTC, what sort of preparations, if any, have you taken if the president tries to fire you? And second, what is your outlook on filling the Commissioner Start's nominee being put forth, who would ostensibly be a Democrat?
So, I'm not worried in that regard. This job is an honor, and I take the responsibility quite seriously. Removing minority members of independent commissioners is another example of this administration's censorship and control. And unlawfully removing me from office would disregard the will of Congress, because I was confirmed by a bipartisan majority of Congress to serve the remainder of my term. It would violate the spirit of the law that governs this independent agency. So I'm going to continue to stand firm in my beliefs, and I'm going to continue to speak up in defense of the First Amendment and on behalf of consumers. As to your second question, I don't know.
Thank you.
Hi, Commissioner Gomez. Jericho Casper with Broadband Breakfast. I'm curious if you have a reaction to activist Gavin Wax joining Symington's office as Chief of Staff. This is a person who has previously promised to seek retribution against all of Trump's critics. Do you believe Wax holds the credentials to assume such a position, and will this further the politicization of the FCC that you've spoken of before? Thank you.
Congratulations to him. I have not had a chance to speak with him yet, and I look forward to working with him. I don't have any comment on that.
Hi, Dave Shepherdson from Reuters. Can I ask about the Paramount Global Skydance merger review? One, do you have a sense of how active the commission is currently in that review? We're getting close, as Chairman Carr said, to the 180-day informal clock. And secondly, do you think it's appropriate for the commission to seek to either restrict or eliminate the use of DEI as a condition of a merger approval?
So with regard to the transaction, I don't have any updates on the timing of the transaction. With regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I don't think it's appropriate for this commission to be interfering in the fair labor practices of private companies. And if we do look at any issues in a transaction, then I would want those issues to be related to whatever the potential harms of a transaction are. And I cannot imagine that diversity, equity, and inclusion practices would in fact be something that would be a potential harm in a proposed transaction. And that is usually when we condition approval of a transaction, it is because we are trying to address a potential harm that is raised by that specific transaction. And just backing up, diversity and equity and inclusion is not discrimination. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is in fact about fairness. And so I don't think the FCC should be interfering in these private companies' practices, much less making them part of a transaction review.
Drew Fitzgerald, The Wall Street Journal. I'm wondering if you have any more information on this internal DOJ team that the chairman spoke about, how many members there are, whether they're on the payroll, what their remit is, and have you seen from the external DOJ team any activity?
I don't have any information on DOJ activities within the commission. If we do have any DOJ activities, I hope that it is a thoughtful and deliberative process and that it is not taking a chainsaw to the FCC, but instead keeps in mind that our core mission is to protect consumers and to promote innovation and competition. And I think this commission does that very well. Monty?
Yeah, you're doing a tour, and you've run into some problems with your official travel in the past. Have you had any difficulties planning the travel for your tour?
No.
I noticed the first event was here, for one thing.
Yes. My understanding is the pause on travel has been lifted, and so I intend to do travel around the country as part of this tour. And my normal duties, which I was confirmed to do, was to get out and speak to people in addition to all my other duties. So I am unaware that there are issues at this point. If I am stopped again, then it'll just be another part of this administration's censorship and control.
Hi, Jericho Casper, one more time. I'm curious if the federal hiring freeze going until June 15th is affecting you at all, or the agency?
The FCC or me at Commissioner Gomez's office? Okay. No, it's not affected me. But in terms of the FCC, I imagine that it is. We've seen a lot of employees, really good, dedicated staff take early outs already, and I'm sure that we will see further departures, which really makes me worried about brain drain at the agency. So I'm sure the hiring freeze is impacting our ability. You know, whenever there's cuts, it doesn't seem like we ever get a reduction in our responsibilities. So you know, it's going to mean that we're going to have to focus what resources that we do have. And again, I hope that what we do is we focus it on our core mission.
One more. I was wondering if you can tell us whether the FCC is making any preparations in case the court orders restructuring of the Universal Service Fund, and can it make those preparations in advance?
You'd have to ask the chairman's office about that. I'm not sure what the commission is doing. I am deeply hopeful that the court does not, that the court reverses the Fifth Circuit decision because the Universal Service Fund is so very important to ensuring affordable connectivity throughout the country. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. Okay. One more? No. Thank you.